Hi everyone, I am Nina Johnson. We're here today. We're going to hop on a live stream with Anna Betbeze from LA. We're chatting with Anna today because we're lucky to be able to participate in the new Art Dealers Alliance initiative called FAIR. That project is live now and it's up on thisisfair.org. We're showing a series of new works by Anna, and I see her here on the chat, so we're going to loop her in and wait for some other folks to join us on here. Anna, for some reason it's saying that you are unable to join me, so maybe you could request to join onto here. You should see a little window that says request to join.
Hey,
Hi!
how are you?
I'm so good. How are you doing?
I'm good. This is my first Instagram live, so it's all new.
I'm so excited. Hold on one second. I flipped this around because I had to use wired headphones today because I lost my earbuds, which I knew was like inevitably going to happen. Those tiny little things. How you doing, Anna?
I'm good. I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy we're doing this. It's nice to see you.
It's so good to see you. So where are you? Are you home? Are you in the studio?
I'm home in my studio. So now my studio is in the bottom, sort of. I bought this like old house. It's been a crazy journey, but the bottom floor is sort of a cleared out, more industrial kind of space. So, and then there's a
Amazing.
living space up top.
So I've been following, for everyone that's just joining us now, I'm Nina Johnson, and we're live here with Anna Betbeze from Los Angeles. And Anna is working out of her new, first of all, you were very diligent to get up early for us this morning.
Everyone in LA gets up early. I don't know. Like friends call me at 6 a.m. It's like
Oh my
very
gosh.
different than New York City.
It's so crazy. You're too connected to the East Coast to be sleeping into a reasonable hour there. But Anna is joining us from her new home in LA that she purchased and has been in a long process of renovation. Um, so Anna, tell us a little bit, because you were on the East Coast, you were in New York for a long time and teaching at Yale, and this move to LA has been really fantastic for you. And I think definitely one of the reasons that the work kind of shifted so much, and the body of work that we're showing as part of FAIR is definitely part of that shift. It was kind of in your first couple of years out in LA working with this new material. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that it's both that I mean I moved here, so it's almost been 2 years, which is like really wild how time works. And um, the move was prompted. I took a job. I'd been at Yale for almost 10 years, and I took a job at University of California, Riverside. But that I was re really wanting to move to Los Angeles, or wanting to move out of New York, because my work was changing in a way, because I was sort of wanting more time and space, what I was wanting to sort of experiment more. I needed more time in a way. And this job has really offered me that. And I teach like 1 day a week. It's a really wonderful experience. And so I'd always really felt very connected to a lot of LA artists, like people like Mike Kelly, people who are working with more social and domestic sort of themes in their work in a way. And I don't know. So it's been really great. I
Amazing.
spend more time outside. I have a huge outdoor space as part of my workspace now, which was never really possible in New York. I was always like going places where I could work outside, going back to Georgia, staying with my mom so I could sort of do these projects, and it just was not like sustainable. So here, it's offered so many different possibilities, but it's different. It's definitely different than New York. And I'm like a 20-minute walk to downtown Los Angeles, but my neighbor has goats and chickens. So it's like a very
I
But
love it.
yeah.
I love it. And I love that, that for me, I want to pull up some of the images as we talk. So they'll get cropped. I don't have not yet figured out how to uncrop them unless I do that, and then you could see the whole image. But this body of work, which was initially, we had a show last year, right? Last year.
Yeah, last year.
Um, Anna's solo exhibition, it was your second with the gallery. And your first show, you showed the wool pieces that were dyed and burned. And I remember visiting you when you had first moved out to LA. And I know you had worked with the Mylar a little bit in New York, but it felt quite different than it does in this series and than it did in your show, Accidental Pictures. So tell us a little bit about this material and kind of how it developed. It feels like all the light and kind of industry of Los Angeles is in these pictures, but I'd love.
Can you hear me? Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
I was like up until this group of works, I'd been really resistant to pictures at all, or imagery or images, and it was really important in my work always that it dealt with sort of sensation and like the body and sort of like the presence of the object, and that we a lot of the new projects I've been working on specifically deal with the sensation of touch, which we can get to in a little while, but not sort of vision at all. And a lot of it, and we are becoming so vision dominant with so much digital media, and now we're in sort of this new world where we can't sort of touch or be in rooms with one another. And I think that when I was making this work, I was thinking a lot about how we had become sort of obsessed with pictures and images, and how a lot of times images or pictures made with cameras and phones and through digital media are so they lack sort of mystery and interpretation and light, and the idea of an accidental picture, the idea that something can sort of materials can come together to form an image, and then you move to the right or the left and it completely changes because of the light. And so it was about working with light. It was about working with when we're looking, what are we looking at? What are we looking for? How we see pictures and things that are not, that
Mm-hmm.
we see imagery that we can project into these sort of fields. And to me, that felt really important in terms of sort of the way we've become more like vision dominant or vision
And it's
oriented.
it's funny because when we have had your work up in the gallery, we always tell people it's sort of like with the caveat of you're seeing this under controlled lighting and like such specific lighting versus in the domestic environment. And I think the way that that relates to your own shift now, working in this other space that's also home for you, will be really interesting to see how it develops. I get to live with your work and I love it so much. And one of the reasons is because it's so dynamic, it isn't just a static picture.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, one of the things that I think has been so difficult for everyone is change, kind of having this like dramatic change sort of like foisted upon you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the catharsis of recognizing that in objects that artists make, there is constant change, right? Like there's one school of thought that these things are forever static and exist in one condition, and there's another that they really reflect a changing time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I wanted to show, if we can do it, we're going to be sort of adventurous and try to share a video. There was one that you sent me this morning that I loved. Um, you know what? Let's see if it, this light, I hadn't seen it yet. So let me switch this way.
Oh,
What
yeah.
do you think is less interrupted, that way or the other way?
I think that seems good
Okay.
this way.
Okay, I can't seem to play it. So maybe
There you
we
go.
can't
I think
play
it's
it.
playing.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Is it playing now?
No.
Okay. No, I don't think it'll play. I switched it over to the static image. Tell us a little bit about what this is. I don't think we can actually watch the videos on here when we're together, but we'll post them to the stories after so that if anyone wants to see them, they can.
So this is an image from just like a couple weekends ago, and it's a sort of project with my friend and sort of collaborator Corazon del Sol, who's a really close sort of friend of mine, and we've been making work together for a little while. And it's really just simple. I mean, it's hard not to see the video, but we've been really trying to figure out a way to safely be in public space and public and perform and sort of ways. So this was just uh, Tarzan and I like playing with clear plastic, sort of puppeting it. We got pitchforks and palm branches, and we were making these really large sort of formations. And people were driving by and sort of stopping. And I went this past Sunday. We, with about six other artists, sort of separately made a procession down Mission Street with some of these things that we had been doing. And I think that people are really, and you know, we were like safe and sort of spaced out and sort of alone, but it was so, people were stopping and driving by slowly. And I think that it's, uh, you know, people are really craving sort of public light and also like visual dissonance, like something that feels out of the sort of ordinary of this sort of new life that we're in. So it was really great to like be together, even at sort of and try to figure out ways that we can continue to be in public space safely at this moment and not just like stay. Yeah, and there was so much about light and the landscape and sort of yeah, we're doing it at sunset hour so that the sun, we're sort of almost like tracking the sun or sort of using the material to direct light around. It's very simple, but
And Anna, is this going to be an ongoing, like, do you see this as an ongoing project?
yeah, we're gonna, yes, yeah, for the meantime, it's something that also other artists can join, or so we're hoping that people will sort of take part in it. Yeah.
And how do people join it, or if they're in LA, how do they go see it? Like, how do they know that it's happening?
It's not really for the, I mean, it's not really like a performance in the sense that for the public, it's really for whoever's there or driving by, or it's for like us to be in space together. And you know, I think that it's just important to even make the gesture towards being, um, you know, outside and continuing to like live life in, you know, a new way.
Totally. So
Yeah.
the other thing that that you sent me, which we'll post some video of, I was trying to find the images, but I'm having a hard time because I think they were taken a while ago. The touch workshop. So tell us a little bit about that project and when that happened and what the sort of impetus for it. Because I think the timing is interesting. You know, the timing is so great. And now looking at the images, they feel almost like sorted, you know, like you see them and you're just like, wait, what are these people doing? When did that happen? How are they allowed to do this? So
It's
yeah,
also
go ahead.
really wild because we're wearing masks, but on our eyes, not on our mouth. So this is a project that has been in three iterations, and the last one was March 7th. So it was just a couple of days before LA started the stay-at-home order. And it was a project I did at Human Resources, which is a really wonderful artist-run space in LA. It's a big sort of open industrial space, and the first iteration was that I worked with students at Yale. The second one was at Cal Arts last January. And then this one was just for a group of artists. So it wasn't school oriented. And it takes the form a little bit of a workshop, except I'm not a teacher in the sense. It's more a space that happened over a few days for artists to come and experiment with the touch sense in art. So it was like a kind of open, like almost laboratory. But the first day, most of the participants are blindfolded for most of the time period, and everything is made just through the sense of touch. And the videos, which you can't show, but the second part or phase of the workshop is people, the participants make prosthetics and extensions of the body to create like sensations. So it's not about the way things look. It's things are designed to produce like a feeling. So the event, which happened at Human Resources on the 7th, right before this started, was this sort of people would come that weren't part of the workshop, and there were just all of these sort of contraptions and prosthetics and things all over the floor and on the wall, and people immediately started joining in and putting on things. And but at the door there were blindfolds, so everyone that came in was like blindfolded, and they would sort of feel their way through. People would guide them through different experiences, and it's really like a wild. I mean, it's hard to say now if it like in this moment whether it's very relevant or completely irrelevant. Like there's
Totally.
this thing where it sort of went into the heart of like what we are sort of experiencing now, and sort of went into the loss of what we're experiencing now, the loss of sort of being in a space with people. People were touching each other, bumping into things, moving around, blindfolded. It's disorienting, but you start to get into a different sort of logic, which is the logic of touch and sensation. And my favorite thing about it is that when you sort of rethink about the world in terms of sort of touch and tactility and texture, everything has like a new possibility or a new potential. Meaning that a palm branch or a cinder block is no longer a palm branch or a cinder block. It's like a set of like material textures and weight. And so people were making things with all. They're like, oh, I need something to like weight down this other part, and they would go outside and like find a piece of trash and tie it, And so everything became had potential again, and it wasn't about sort of signifier, signified meaning, language, all these things that are sort of. It was so much about just like the feeling of yeah, that's a really amazing puppet. So also the room was really dimly lit. It's hard to see that one.
There we
um
go.
uh, yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can just switch it. There we go.
So that's an image of a sort of puppet that one could get inside and sort of move through, and as you walked, this smaller puppet would walk. But so there was like a sort of feeling. I don't know. It's so much about like gestures of the body and sort of internal sensations. And then there's this whole other aspect of it, which is the idea of performance, which is not for a visual spectacle. It's like a performance that happens like a more internal sort of feeling. I don't know if
It's
that
in,
makes sense, but
It's interesting
yeah.
for you to say that, and for me, it was really eye-opening to see a lot of this type of work in your studio, like over the years visiting you, because I do think, with the objects that you make, we always talk about the sort of physicality of them, that they're almost like a residue of a series of gestures. And while they're much more considered in terms of like where they're going to land than than what an exercise like this is about. I think that the intention is very similar, where you're kind of like letting go of yourself. And for me, it's been wonderful to see how these types of exercises come out in the objects eventually, and I think part of what felt so poignant about looking at this now, and I realize, we'll post again these images to our stories because they're distorted here. But, this sense of kind of walking through space blindfolded, and walking through an environment with so much uncertainty in front of you, and sort of being handicapped by your own making, like by the surroundings that you've made yourself, is definitely feels exactly like where we are right now. And the other thing that struck me about this in relationship to our current moment was touching objects, like the idea of like the object as this sort of intermediary between a group of people, which is something that even now has become alien, you know, like somebody hands you a pen, here, like sign this thing or whatever. And in some way, that pen was like the connective tissue between you and the person delivering this thing to you or showing up or whatever. And now, like, even that is like a loaded gesture, you know, like, can you touch this thing? Can you share this thing? Oh, and now this video is
Oh, and,
working.
oh, great.
Yay!
Wonderful.
We're all learning as part of this process.
No, it's funny you said, I mean, in the workshop, we talked about first of all, prosthetics of, or sort of like shared sites of sensation. So we talked about like doorknobs, for instance. We were like, this was like before, and this was even like a year ago, as this sort of place or site where there's like a touch transmission that everyone sort of touches. It's sort of about like where these things occur, where these sort of experiences occur, how we're sort of connected to like each other through touch. And then also a lot of the workshop was about how to extend touch into distance. So how to, at a distance, like make people feel something, like how you can sort of extend the body. So it's really interesting. I mean, I think I've had a few different people approach me about sort of adapting this workshop towards sort of ways to come out of this time period. I think that there's going to be a very difficult sort of like re-entry into, I think that it's really confusing now because, the thing that you would want to do to like comfort someone, like to give them a hug, has now been sort of changed into sort of like, oh, I'd be hurting them or risking something. And so I think that those things are really going to take a lot of like thought and consideration about how to
how
touch
to
again,
undo
to be
them.
intimate. Yeah, how to undo it and how to, yeah.
It's interesting, you know, we've also been thinking a lot about what it means to have people in the space because we've been open by appointment, you know, just recently. And even that, you know, it's, you can kind of feel yourself hesitating, even though you know you're sort of taking all of the precautionary measures. Any kind of step into a space outside of your own right now does feel like a measured risk. And so there is a kind of almost like PTSD or something that comes with that. And I think artists are uniquely positioned to help people navigate their feelings, getting out of it, you know. Um, I'm trying to pull up now some images from the current work, the pieces that we're showing. And I'm just having to kind of scroll back. But have you been working through this, Anna? Like, I know you talked about having you know, kind of enacting these gestures. These are some images of your garden, which is why I know that you've been working on your kind of domestic space. And I know that you moved into your new place in the midst of all this. Oh, look, this is such a great. I loved what you said, Anna. Everything has had potential again.
Oh, I love Morgan.
um,
um,
so yeah, tell us a
this
little
is
bit about.
Artemisia. I've been planting, most of the plants are Chinese herbs, and actually a lot of things that have medicinal sort of properties, honeysuckle, mugwort, dreaming herbs, and yeah, that's Artemisia. Yeah, so it's been really, I have been working. I've been working, I think that one thing about the touch workshop and, coming to Los Angeles, and I've been collaborating more, and what work means has changed, or at least expanded into a lot of different things. And I think that what I'm experiencing now is a sort of porousness between art and life, and sort of thinking more about how these things are intertwined. I mean, I've spent a lot of time working through the materials of the touch workshop, and I've been working on some new kinetic works that you've seen a little bit of, and I've been working with magnets and magnetic fields. I have a little like magnetic field that I can levitate things with in my studio. That's been
Amazing.
really fun.
That sounds like you. I pulled this up because you said, that you've been working with um, kind of kinetic objects, and obviously the relationship between this piece and these pieces is so strong. So tell us, because this is a very ongoing project. Like this, you've been working on for almost 2 years.
Yeah, it's been sort of yeah, I've been working on it. It really came out of wanting, the works that you're showing, this works on Mylar, are sort of um, a a moment where I was really sort of thinking about kinetic experiences with like liveliness. What does it mean for something to move or shift across space? Like, how do we feel? Um, like, I think sometimes, I guess what I'm trying to say is like it was the beginning of thinking about time in the work and thinking about movement, which I think you were right to say that the early works like had all this residue of gesture and of movement, and you could see my body sort of moving, but you were sort of left with a little bit of a artifact of that performance or that experience. And I think that in the last years, I've been thinking about how to have more of the sort of performativity or the sort of experience live and not yeah. And I think that there's, I'm a painter. I've made paintings um, in many different ways and in many different things, but one of the things that is so exciting to me about painting is the way that light moves through color and the way that surfaces change over through texture and tactility, and the way that things are layered and that you actually see through one sort of material into another. And those are things that I'm starting to like pull out into different forms. And I started working on these puppets, which are in the aluminum foil, around the same time I was working on the Accidental Pictures show. And I mean, this is again something that's sort of where everything can become has the potential. Like aluminum foil can all of a sudden sort of be this material that has nothing to do with the kitchen, but has more to do with the sort of just the light and the quality of the material. But I started working on these. It's kind of a long story, but I visited the Czech artist and animator Jan Spankmeyer, who's like a brilliant, like 86-year-old surrealist artist. And he had written a book on like tactile art, touch-based art, that had become a huge influence on the workshop I'd been teaching. And through visiting him, so I went to. Did I lose you? Okay.
No, I'm here.
It was a really exciting visit, but his work had really come out of animating objects like stakes and like clay. He's, I think, been kind of considered the inventor of claymation. But he had been sort of about, and I realized that so much of his work was about the sort of space between life and death, to bring life into sort of inert matter, and to sort of bring puppets to life and to bring dolls to life. And then also his house was full of like taxidermy and things that had been alive also. So it was like this really strange sort of, and I felt really connected to that. Like I felt really connected through like the fur works and thinking about sort of liveness and the earlier works. And something started to open up in terms of thinking about that space of liveness in work. And also I think that these works have a lot to do with sort of with artificial intelligence. I think they have a lot to do with like the loss of like what's lost and the sort of sadness of something like artificial intelligence. So there's these ways that these forms like breathe and open and change and move and almost like dye, and then you have like a sort of feeling about it, and then you're like, wait, I'm looking at tin
I'm
foil,
looking at aluminum foil.
or you have like
Totally.
care. It's actually really funny because when I go to my kitchen now and I pull out the drawer and I see the aluminum foil, I have a very different feeling about aluminum
Yeah.
foil.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and I
it's
don't
funny
know that
because
this. Yeah, yeah.
no, I mean, I think even in your wool work, there is, this idea of like eliciting empathy from an object, and we've had some really great conversations about people's reactions to the wool, like wanting to be wrapped in it or actually wrapping themselves in it or laying on it or like, just sort of interesting things that people have done with your objects. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think to see this, I loved it. And now that we figured out, see, I don't know why this one just won't play. It's just kind of being stubborn in the mix. But, I think what this idea of experimentation and kind of like broadening, I think you've always been somebody that pushes inside of your own work. But I think this is something that LA has been really fantastic for you. Like a way that LA has been really fantastic is sort of allowing yourself the space to do this, and to push in this way. Um,
Well, I
so,
think also moving and just movement. I guess one thing I realized about these things is like movement, like sort of shifts everything. And like all of us, and I think that like to move is to sort of like locate into a new set of possibilities. And so I actually really love living here for a lot of reasons that I didn't expect. But I think that it also was just about moving, changing places, changing scenery, yeah.
and you also have undergone like the past year and a half for you has been like really dedicated to the renovation of this house, which I think is its own. I mean, you're basically have done to that structure what you do to your work, which is like gut it out, like very kind of like physically, transform your space in this way where you kind of like tore the object down to like its bare essence and then rebuilt back up not only what is essential, but what sort of provides comfort and beauty and and I think that's very much in your practice, that you take these things and um, kind of break them down and then also build them back up, into what the viewer needs, what you need, but then eventually like what the viewer needs to experience from these things.
Mm-hmm.
um, I wanted to ask, I just sometimes people put little questions and comments and stuff, and there was one, I feel that you must love Rebecca Horn. And if anyone has other questions or comments or things that they want to share with us in the chat, please do so and we can answer them. While we still have a little bit of time, I think we have about 10 minutes before we would be cut off here. And in the interim, I think, yeah, I'll let you kind of answer that question or answer to that comment if it's anything that speaks to you.
I loved Rebecca Horn's work when I was in undergraduate, like 18, 19 years old. I haven't thought about it in a while, so it's interesting to think about. I certainly think it's relevant, especially to the touch workshop and these kind of prosthetics that she would make to sort of reach across the room. And yeah, I can see it's in there somewhere.
Totally. And tell us a little bit, you started to touch on some of the LA artists that have been, that you felt a kinship to and their relationship to the domestic. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a way that an artist like Mike Kelly was hugely influential to me, and continues to be. And I think that someone like Chris Burden, Charlie Ray, there was a lot of artists, even thinking about like Andrea Frazier, were all really different artists. The sort of have also made space for teaching in their work in this way that is really ambitious, and or not ambitious isn't the right word, meaningful. And I feel like the institutions are full here of people like Barbara Kruger is like an incredible teacher, from what I've heard. And um, there's a lot of I don't know what it is about the LA landscape. I think that, I feel a little ambivalent about Los Angeles. Like, I love New York. I love New York so much, and I continue to love New York. And I don't identify with Los Angeles in the same way. I think that there's a way that also the art scene here is a little bit on the periphery of the dominant sort of culture. It like feels kind of gritty and peripheral. It feels like
Hmm.
people sort of hiding out and doing their things that they're really into in these other locations, and you have to kind of find them through these other channels, and it's a very different thing than New York, where everything is sort of more accessible. So but I think that there's real, there's real alienation here. There's a lot of space here. There's nature. Um, there's ways that I have a lot of conflict about the city itself, and then there's ways that I think conflict um, is really productive. And I think that there's something like far more American about Los Angeles than New York. In New York, you can kind of pretend, I don't know, something. There's something about LA that reminds me of growing up in the South that I don't love, but that
Yeah.
I also love. And I think that, yeah, I think that
Or
I think
that,
that, yeah.
or that somehow like instigates that in you,
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
what I mean. It's like a kind of conflict that sort of provokes something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. It's interesting what you said about alienation in LA, and I think that that's such a great, it's such a great theme that runs through so much of what's produced out there, whether it's like cinema or contemporary art or whatever. But also right now is like quite universal. And it's funny, like we've been thinking of it in terms of the gallery because, being in Miami, we typically connect to so much of our audience digitally anyway that the situation is oddly familiar to us in a way
Mhm.
that when we talk to our colleagues in New York, it's not to them, that like the fundamental core of what they're doing. Whereas for us, so much of it already was not, prior to this. So it's been interesting to hear so many artists, talk about how we've kind of joked like, yeah, artists are built for the apocalypse, right? Because like you guys already have the
For
tools.
better or worse, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like you already have the tools necessary to be alone and productive and sort of process these kinds of traumas or like societal changes in a way that most people don't, you know? Um, One of the things, Anna, that we did was reach out and ask for your sort of quarantine reads. So maybe you could share with us on a kind of lighter note, what is it that's kind of been getting you through right now? Books and movies and music and other artists. Like, what has really been something that's being comforting or maybe not comforting?
I'm trying to think what I've been reading a lot. I mean, I think I really delved pretty deep after the touch workshop into reading about touch. So I've been reading Eve Sedgwick. I can't remember what I put on that list because I think what I was reading at the time was a little different. But I've been reading Eve Sedgwick's book Touching Feeling. I've been reading what else have I been reading? I've been reading Elaine Scarry's book, Thinking in Emergency, which is an incredible book about sort of how habit forms and how we think through in moments of crisis, and it has to do a lot with like the time. What am I trying to say? She sort of goes through like ideas of like CPR, which is like an immediate kind of management of crisis, and talks through other ideas like of constitutional deliberation, and sort of it sort of is a warning about how in moments of crisis we can sort of act too fast, and sometimes dangerous things can happen. But it's a lot about sort of habit and thought and sensation and thought and yeah, those kinds of things.
That's
I don't know.
so
I
I
listen. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I think that that's a great book for everyone to read because people are so scared that there's been so much conversation about, we're just giving away our civil liberties as a result of fear and not even thinking about it.
Exactly.
A friend told me that up the street they're doing testing, and the gallery neighborhood is quite low income, and what he was saying was if you pay, so you can pay $70 and it's private, but if you agree to donate your results for research, it's free. And I thought that was such an interesting, I'm all for the research, but sort of the minutia of that. I don't know research for what, for who, like how much information is given or not.
Well, yeah, the core of the book is that those questions are really important, right? The questions you just asked: for who, for what, everyone's like contact tracing. Well, contact tracing for who, for what, for how long? There's a lot of things that those kind of conversations get foregone in these moments, and it's really that those things are dangerous. It's important to sort of those questions are really important. So last
Stop the
night I put red lights all over my house and I listened to Don Cherry laying on the floor. That was nice. I've been listening to a lot of sort of jazz and more, I don't know, ambient music lately.
And
I
is
don't
the
know.
new house feeling lived in?
Yeah, it's starting to.
Good,
Yeah, it's starting to.
good. Well,
Yeah.
Anna, I think I'll let you go. This has
Okay,
been
this has
so
been
fun. I'm
so
so
nice to
happy
see
to
you.
see you. And I'm gonna, just for everyone that's on here, we'll post some of the videos that we talked about to our story. This will be live on our story for 24 hours and archived up on YouTube after that. And Anna's works are available at NADA. I just want to say really quickly what that's about, and I want to thank you for agreeing to participate. NADA devised a model that kind of seeks to support the artist and gallery community as a whole. The artists and dealers each receive 25% of the sale, and then 20% of the sales are collectively pooled and shared between all of the participating artists. 20% are collectively pooled and shared between all of the participating galleries. And there will be one new work from each gallery posted every week for the next 4 weeks. So hopefully people go on and support that. We're really excited to, help think through this moment with them and think of creative ideas that help everybody and not just, some of us. So anyway, thank you so much, Anna. Thank you
Thank
everyone
you,
for joining
Nina.
on here. Have a great rest of the day.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.